Good evening, livelings. It is the Daily Chronicle continued. I thought I'd do a quick recap. So on August 16th, I took Terry to the hospital, the emergency room, found out he had shadows on his lungs, suspected metastasized cancer. The next day, the oncologist confirmed that he did have tumors in his lungs and wanted to find the source of the cancer. So he admitted him to the hospital where they ran tests, and they found that he had colon cancer and a huge blockage. And the next day they did surgery to remove the tumor that was blocking his colon and gave him a colostomy. I knew how dire the situation was, but I wasn't sure that he did. I didn't know what he had been told. And so things were kind of left unsaid. I was sworn to secrecy, and that had to change because it was just too difficult for me. I had a 12-year-old who had just started school, and I had to shuffle back and forth from the hospital. And I finally convinced Terry that I needed to let Chris come to see him. We didn't have to tell him what exactly was going on, but at least to see that he was okay. And so I went and got Chris from school and brought him over. And Terry told him he was just having tests and everything was going to be okay. And I would go home at night with Chris. And Terry, of course, stayed in the hospital. So we're 3 days in. And I mentioned to you earlier that Terry gave me power of attorney over his finances. And we did not have a joint bank account. And after speaking to the surgeon and knowing that Terry could go anytime, really, but that he did not have long, surgeon thought maybe 3 months, 6 on the outside. But he was clearly very, very sick. So while he was sleeping and recovering from surgery, I went to the bank because I knew and had heard that bank accounts get frozen when people pass, and my power of attorney would not be effective anymore the minute Terry died. I also knew that Terry didn't have a will, or he had a very outdated one, 20 years or more old. So he didn't really have a standing will. So his affairs were not in order. And I didn't have any source of income other than Terry. So I went to the bank thinking that I would just transfer over some money into my account in case something happened so that I would have operating funds. And so I went to the bank and I met with the branch manager, and I had my power of attorney in hand, and I said, this is the situation. He's very sick and I don't have enough money to pay bills and stuff in my account, so I want to transfer some of his money into my account so that I can pay the mortgage and do whatever I need to do while he's incapacitated. And so she said, sure, of course, I'll help you. And I gave her the power of attorney, which had his Social Security on it. And she pulled up all the accounts that were in under that number. He had his personal checking account, he had a savings account, and then he had about 8 LLCs. And I knew about all of them. He had all kinds of different holdings, and so he had bank accounts for everything. I didn't know the details, but I certainly saw the statements come in the mail and whatnot. And so she opens up his checking account, and I was going to take out a few $1,000s so that I had working capital. And she said, well, there's only $5,000 in this account. And I said, wow, okay. Well, look at his savings account. Well, there was only $300 in his savings account. And then I said, wow, okay, well, he must have the money in the other accounts. And I said, his mother just died. He just inherited like $180,000. You know, there's got to be money somewhere. And he must have put it in one of the businesses. And she opened up every business account. There was $96 in one, or there was $102 in another, and there was $35 in the other, $35 in the other. And we went through all the accounts, and as she opened each one and there was no money, and she'd pull up the activity and we'd see all the withdrawals, I realized we didn't have any money. There was no money. It was all gone. And I kept saying, oh, there's got to be somewhere else that there's more money. There can't just be $5,000. That can't be all there is. And she could see I was panicked. And she kept looking and trying to find other accounts, and there just weren't any. And that's when I realized we were broke. I left the bank. I felt like somebody had punched me in the stomach. I couldn't believe it. I knew that he had invested a ton in properties in Florida during 2006. And then, of course, in 2008, everything crashed, and Florida was one of the hardest hit states for the real estate market crashing. And what he had done for the next 3 years was burn through all his cash, trying to keep everything afloat. And we had nothing left. We had nothing left. So I left the bank, and I needed to go back to the hospital and check in, and I can't even describe to you what that felt like. I was so angry. I was so angry. But everything, all the little hints of comments that he had made over the last few months started to, it's like one of those scenes in the movie where somebody has a realization, you know, and they do the telescopic lens, and it just kind of goes. It was just like that. It was just like, all of it made sense. All the comments, all the reasons he didn't want to go out anymore, and there was just so many little hints that I kind of went, I wonder why he said that. But I never you know, and if I did say something to him and I'd say, what do you mean by that? Are you serious? And it was like, oh, no, I'm just making a joke. For example, if we went out to dinner with friends, he would usually pick up the tab. He was very generous. And in the last few months, he didn't want to go out. We'd get invited to go to dinner, and he'd go, yeah, I don't want to go because everybody will expect me to pay. And I'd like, well, that's your thing. You always pay. Why? He was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And it just all started making sense. Just those little hints. And for years, he really didn't want me to work, but all of a sudden, he was encouraging me to go back into real estate. And it was just shifts, little nuances like that, little shifts. And in that moment, it all made sense. Why he was acting the way he was. Trying to tell me, but not really telling me. So I went back to the hospital, and I remember standing outside the door, and I just wanted to walk through that door and just blast him and say, how could you not tell me we have no money? On top of everything else. But when I walked through the door and I saw him there laying in that bed, so helpless, and oxygen and tubes, and I'd say a word. Just said, how are you feeling, honey? What do you do? When you know somebody's dying, you don't go in and start a fight. I don't anyway. No. I just sucked it up. I just sucked it up. That's all I got for tonight.